All right, guys. So after this morning's interesting Skeetersoft game, I thought it would be fun to look up information about Billy Maloney. I was sort of interested to learn a little bit more about him and did a little bit of looking over at his Sabre biography. I'll show you here on the screen. There we go. His Sabre biography is pretty short. I mean, really short. There's a lot of questions that I have, and I haven't had the time to really look into it as much as I'd like to. One of the questions I have is why did he stop playing in the major leagues after 1908? I'm guessing that it's probably because his average went down to 195. He did enjoy it's a pretty mediocre slugging percentage. He did, however, hit 3 home runs that season. And as we've seen, he has 3 so far in the Skeetersoft replay. So, I mean, it's not bad. It could definitely be a lot worse. But there are a couple other things that are interesting about him. I actually know this guy because he started off with the Milwaukee Brewers in 1901. That's why his name seems a little bit familiar. And it would be really interesting to learn a little bit more about sort of what happened before then. I click on show minors, nothing happens. It would take a bit of research to go through and start digging and figure out exactly what happened with Maloney. Unlike some of the others we've seen, he didn't pass away right at the end of the season. So that's not the reason why. And he was only 30. And you'd have to believe that somebody, I mean, he's probably not going to hit 300 for you, but you'd have to believe that somebody would want this guy to go over and play center field for him. He could play for my team. That's fine. But the interesting thing that I learned about him comes from this game. This is Chicago Tribune, August 10th, 1905. And New York was beaten in a game marked by an unusual play. So around this time, the Cubs were in fourth place. The 1905 Giants, of course, one of the great teams of all time. They were at 70-30, which is pretty impressive. And that's where we will read here about good old Maloney and his odd tally. So Frank Seeley, who has gained strength rapidly since he laid down the reins of management, was out yesterday to watch the team he built up defeat the New Yorkers in the third game of their visit here. This is in Chicago. And although he sat in a box instead of in his accustomed place at the helm, he proved a strong mascot. The score was 7-2, but until the end of the seventh inning, it was anybody's bout. That seventh was a tense and glorious affair. When it began, Chicago led 3-1. The visitors filled up the bases in their half before a man was dead. Things looked blue, but Wicker pitched himself out of that cavern with the loss of only half of Chicago's lead. In the pinch, McGraw sent Bowerman to bat in Ames' place to pull his men into the lead if possible, but failed. Then McGinnity was put on the slab, and the Fourth Nationals gave him a merry reception, putting the game beyond the reach in a trice. I'm not quite sure. Fourth Nationals may refer to them being in fourth place. I'm not 100% sure exactly what that refers to. You have to breed a lot to figure it out. But here we go. Scores on out at plate. In that merry session, something happened which, as far as known, never happened before in baseball and probably never will again. It was nothing less than the feat of scoring a run on an out at the plate. It was by long odds the feature of the day. Wicker started Chicago's half with a single off the Iron Man Slagle. Slagle drew a pass, and Maloney beat out a bunt, filling the sacks with none out. Manager Chance, who had made only 3 singles already, whipped a long fly to right. Strang made a desperate run for it, and Wicker and Slagle stuck to their bases to advance on the catch if made, but Maloney ran close to second base. Strang could not get to the ball, and a merry chase started. Wicker trotted home, and Slagle and Maloney began a 60-yard dash from second, with Jimmy in the lead not more than 1 step all the way. Unprecedented situation. Around third base into the stretch, they came still not a yard apart. Fast work by Strang, and Dolan shot the ball to Bresnahan, who put it on Slagle just as he slid home, and at almost the same instant, Maloney slid under Slagle and safely. It was done so quick that Bresnahan could not have touched both men had he been able to think fast enough. But the play was so unique that both teams swarmed around O'Day, eager for the decision. New York claimed both men were out, while Chicago wanted both called safe. But Hank was not confused, although he never saw a play like it before. He correctly called Slagle out and Maloney safe. And then Chicago's hospital list was increased by the pop bottle nuisance, and the left field bleachers have themselves to blame for putting McCarthy out of the game at a time when he is needed badly. Apparently, we're throwing pop bottles onto the field. Anyway, you can kind of keep that in mind. We're not going to be able to recreate that in any simulation, that's for sure. But yeah, there you have it. That's the time that a man scored on an out at the plate. I've never heard of that happening before. I mean, I've never heard of that before. And it makes me wonder how this was covered elsewhere. So let's see if we can figure this out. We want to go to the other favorite newspaper of ours with the excellent reporting. And we know that we have a whole bunch of pages from 1905, August 9th, 1905. Let's see what we can find here. Giants nip and tuck fight. Giants lose. So you can see that they didn't have the full game updated by the time this headline went out, but they did have the score. And we'll see if there's any sort of information here at all. Yeah, that's that one run that we read about, and that looks like that's all that she wrote for the Evening World. I'm not seeing any late editions or anything like that. We could look at the next day and just see. But usually, the next day, by the next day, all they cared about was what happened that day, as opposed to the day before. If that doesn't work, no worries, because we do have backup papers that are a little bit less fun and descriptive. It would be nice if, in addition to the Evening World, we had the actual New York World for these dates, but unfortunately we don't for whatever reason. I know somebody will come along and tell me that, well, if I just go pay for this service or that service, we could get it, and it probably would happen. So, I mean, I don't know. We can take a look at that maybe sometime later. Let's see if the Sun had much to say about this. Yeah, let's see here. Not much. Yeah, no, it's just Wicker singled, Slagle walked, Maloney beat a bunt, and Chance doubled. 3 runs came in before the inning closed. So there's like no information at all there. Well, that was not very helpful, was it? Let's see. We could always go to the old Steady, the New York Times, because we do have free access to that. I mean, I have access to other New York Times newspapers, as probably do most of you, through your local libraries. We can just go ahead and take a look at that and see. Usually, the New York Times back in these days didn't have very good sports coverage. Let's take a look here and see. Yeah, winners score 2nd runs to 2 for McGraw's team. Yeah, here we go. In that session, something happened which, so far as known, never happened before in baseball. It was nothing less than the feat of scoring a run on and out at the plate. This is exactly the same. Yeah, no, this is exactly the same story. Interesting. Yeah, this is written exactly the same way. So much for that. We'll see if we can find another source. One of the things that you learn, isn't it? This was, yes, special to New York Times, Chicago. So what they did is they just used the Chicago Tribune story. Well, so much for that. Maybe the New York Tribune might have something. And this is quickly turning into not much of a video here on my part. See if we can capture any more information about it. It's kind of a shame, usually I'll rely a lot on the work that the Sabre historians do to give me an idea of what was going on. But that... Unfortunately, a biography didn't have much more other than sort of basic information. And so then we have to do this sort of hopping around business. Here we go, the wild world of sport, and there's just no information in here at all. Look at this. Chicago beat New York here today by a score of 7-2. 3 free passes by Ames were turned into runs by steals, long flies, and timely hits. Wicker kept the hits off him well scattered until the 7th, when 3 singles in a row filled the bases, but only 1 run was scored. In the 9th inning of the game, that's a completely different game. There's one other place that we can look, and this might work. So we'll look here for the Brooklyn Daily Eagle and just take a real quick look and see. They may have had better coverage. It's kind of hit and miss, as you can see with some of these papers. Some of them will give you good coverage. Some of them will give you maybe not quite so great coverage. It just sort of depends on your luck. And it's unfortunate, back in those days, you had a whole bunch of different newspapers to choose from. And you're kind of, today at least, we're kind of dependent upon whatever it is that we've decided to, digitize for whatever reason, usually because of rights issues and stuff, despite the fact that this stuff is all completely, as I understand, out of copyright. Doesn't really matter because you can only display things that you actually own. So let's see what we can figure out. By that, I mean that, like maybe somebody has the archive, but if you don't have the archive yourself, you can't scan it if you don't have it. And I'm not seeing too much else. Really, there's one other thing that we can do, and this might be an interesting try. So what we can do here is we can look up Maloney and then type in August 10th, 1905, and just leave the location completely empty and just sort of see what comes up. There's another thing from New York, I'm sorry, from Chicago. And I'm just going to take a quick look and see. Yeah, that's what we saw before. This is the Evening World again, and that's the error that he committed earlier in the game. Might be a little bit in the Cincinnati Post. We'll check that as well. But it looks like there's not a whole lot by way of coverage, unfortunately. Here you go. All right, let's see what we can figure out here in this one. One of those Maloneyisms. Then occurred one of the greatest races ever seen on any track. Wicker started to jog home from third. This is after that hit. Slagle at second thought for a moment String was going to make a catch. Then he said sail for home. Maloney at first had let out all the wraps. The moment the ball was hit and was riding whip and spur for the stretch. He caught Slagle at the shortstop's position. As they rounded third, Maloney was treading on Slagle's heels. The crowd was yelling like mad. String was relaying the ball to Gilbert for a throw to the plate, and O'Neill was trying to hold Maloney at third. But O'Neill might as well have tried to stop a runaway automobile. Slagle trained on toward the plate with Maloney threatening to run over him at every stride. The two men and the ball arrived home simultaneously, the runners sliding across the plate as one man. Bresnahan tagged Slagle up, but Maloney was safe. Chance, meantime, was safely at third once he scored on O'Neill's long fly to right, sliding past Roger a foot ahead of the ball. So there you go. That's another description of it. Not too much different from the ones that we've seen before. It's kind of a shame that we don't have more of a way of coverage because that was a really, really odd one here. Here you go. From the Cincinnati Post. Billy Maloney overtook Jim Slagle in a race for home at Chicago. They slid for the plate together. Slagle was touched out by Bresnahan, but Maloney scored. Interesting stuff. Yeah, strange plays, 100% right. So there you have it. That's the story of Billy Maloney and one of those Maloneyisms. And interesting stuff for a guy who we just saw homer today and who most of us have forgotten about. Talk to you later. Bye.